come to me today with a question that trembles in your voice and lingers like an ache in your chest. You want to know why? After the radiance of your spiritual awakening, you feel an unsettling emptiness, a void where you expected to find perpetual bliss. You imagined that awakening would fill you with endless clarity, drive, and purpose. But instead, you find yourself drained, unmotivated, and haunted by a strange sense of meaninglessness, and you wonder, have I done something wrong? Was my awakening a mistake? Let me tell you, no. What you are experiencing is not the absence of awakening, but its very shadow. For when the soul awakens, the structures that once propped up your sense of identity, your illusions, your borrowed dreams, the borrowed morality of the collective are stripped away, and you stand naked before the vastness of the self. In the quiet, after the storm of awakening, you are left without the old costumes that once allowed you to play your part in society. What was once automatic, your ambitions, your fears, your striving suddenly feels hollow. The world you thought was real dissolves, and what replaces it is not the instant paradise that spiritual seekers romanticize, but the terrifying expanse of the unknown. It is the desert of the soul, the place where everything unnecessary dies, and the truth waits in silence. And yes, in that silence, there is an emptiness that feels almost unbearable. I know this emptiness, for I too have wandered through its dry winds. It is not a mistake, it is an initiation. We are taught to equate awakening with perpetual ecstasy, as though the light of consciousness will forever illuminate us with joy. But this is not the path of the soul. True awakening is a death of who you believed yourself to be. When this death happens, there is a mourning. It is the mourning of the ego, the mourning of all the masks you once wore. And you, my friend, are mourning. Without realizing it, you stand between two worlds, no longer belonging to the old, but not yet rooted in the new. You feel unmotivated because the old motivations, the fear of failure, the desire to be approved of, the hunger for worldly success are gone. They have lost their grip on you. But the deeper fire, the fire of the self, has not yet fully risen. It is still hidden beneath the ashes of your old identity. And so you feel as though you are drifting. Do not rush to escape this phase, for it is sacred. It is the chrysalis stage of your becoming. You are like the caterpillar that has dissolved inside the cocoon. Neither insect nor butterfly. Just a strange, formless soup of potential. In this space, the mind screams for direction, for something to hold on to, but the soul whispers, wait. The emptiness you feel is not a sign of failure, but a sign of transition. Something within you is rearranging itself at the deepest level. You cannot see it yet, but you are being prepared for a life that is not driven by fear or desire, but by an alignment with something eternal. I have spoken often of the shadow, the part of ourselves that we hide from the world and from ourselves. Spiritual awakening is often romanticized as an expansion into light. But in truth, it is a confrontation with the shadow. And the shadow is not only the dark impulses we repress, it is also the unlived life, the parts of us we have never allowed to be When awakening comes, all of this rises to the surface. The emptiness you feel is the space left behind after the collapse of all the false structures. It is uncomfortable because you no longer know who you are. You no longer believe in the persona you once presented to the world. The archetypes within you, the hero, the caregiver, the lover, the sage, are all rearranging themselves. It feels as if you are a stranger in your own skin. Do not be afraid of this estrangement. In fact, I tell you, it is a blessing. For what you are now learning is that the true self cannot be motivated by the shallow incentives that drove the ego. The ego wants to achieve, to conquer, to accumulate. It wants to be recognized, admired, and applauded. But the self, the eternal self that awakening reveals, does not care for such things. It moves according to a deeper rhythm, a sacred current that does not seek approval but expression. You feel unmotivated now, because the old fuel no longer burns, but the new fuel, the inner fire of the self, has not yet taken over. You are between fires. This is why you feel the cold of the void. There is a dream I often recall when I speak of this phase. In the dream, I am standing in a vast hall, and all around me are broken statues, the remnants of gods and heroes I once worshipped. I feel lost, as though I have no center. But then I see in the corner of the hall a small candle. It flickers softly, barely illuminating the darkness, and a voice says, "This is your light. It is not grand, but it is real. Follow it." That candle is the spark of your true self. It is small now, because you are used to the blinding lights of the world, its achievements, its promises, its false victories. But the candle of the self is enough to guide you. If you honor it, it will grow into a fire that cannot be extinguished. You ask me why you feel empty. And I say, because you are now face to face with the truth that life in its essence is empty of all the meanings we artificially give it. This is not a nihilistic emptiness, but a sacred one. The mystics have called it the void, the dark night of the soul. It is the place where all illusions die, leaving you in a silence so deep that you begin to hear the whispers of eternity. This silence is not your enemy. It is the womb of your rebirth. But to embrace it, you must let go of your addiction to noise, to constant doing, to the endless pursuit of purpose. You must learn to simply be. I know that being feels unbearable. The mind wants to grasp, to define, to label, but the self is beyond all labels. It is like the vastness of the ocean, calm on the surface, but with unfathomable depths. When you awaken spiritually, you are thrown into that ocean. And at first, you feel as if you are drowning, but with time, you learn to float, then you learn to swim. And eventually, you realize that the ocean itself is you. The emptiness you feel now is not permanent. It is simply the space required for the deeper self to emerge. Do not run from it. Sit with it. Listen to what it is teaching you. In the collective psyche, we are trained to fear stillness, to equate inactivity with failure, but in the language of the soul, stillness is transformation. Think of the seed buried in the dark earth. To the outside observer, it appears lifeless, doing nothing. But inside, it is breaking open, transforming, becoming something new. You are that seed. The emptiness you feel is the dark soil in which your soul is taking root. Trust this process. It will not lead you astray. The archetype of death and rebirth is deeply woven into our myths and dreams. Osiris, who is dismembered before being reassembled. Christ, who dies before the resurrection. The phoenix, who burns before rising from the ashes. These myths are not about gods or heroes long gone. They are about you. They are about the psychological and spiritual death that each of us must undergo in order to become whole. Your spiritual awakening is your own crucifixion. The emptiness you feel is the tomb, but I promise you, resurrection is coming. The self does not awaken fully in one flash of light. It awakens in layers, in waves, through darkness as much as through light. I ask you now, what if this emptiness is not something to fix, but something to explore? What if it is not a void, but a doorway? The motivation you are seeking will not come from the old sources. It will not come from ambition or fear. It will arise when you begin to live from the center of your being, from the place that is beyond all duality. To find this center, you must dare to face the silence within. You must dare to look into the mirror of your soul and see not who you think you are, but who you truly are. This is not a task for the faint of heart, but you are stronger than you realize. I will tell you something that might feel unsettling. At first, the emptiness you experience after spiritual awakening is not meant to be filled in the way you imagine. It is meant to be embraced. Most people, when they awaken, desperately try to return to a feeling of purpose or clarity. They seek new spiritual practices, new teachers, new philosophies, hoping to recapture the high they felt in the first moment of realization. But this is not the way of the self. The self does not want you to replace one set of illusions with another. It wants you to stand in the truth of your own nothingness. For only there can you discover what is eternal and unshakable within you. Imagine standing before a mirror that reflects not your face, but the vastness of the cosmos. You see stars being born and dying, galaxies colliding, the endless stretch of time. You realize that your individual self, with its ambitions and fears, is but a tiny flicker in this vastness. At first, this realization is overwhelming. It feels as though you are nothing, as though your life has no meaning. But if you can stay with this vision, if you can allow the terror to pass, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that you are not separate from the cosmos at all. You are both the flicker and the infinity. The emptiness you feel is the doorway to this realization. It strips you of your false identity so that you may awaken to the truth of your eternal nature. There is a shadow side to awakening that few speak about, because it is not glamorous or marketable. It is the phase where you feel lost, detached, and unmoored. The ego, which once gave you a sense of direction, has loosened its grip, and the self has not yet fully taken over. This is why you feel unmotivated. The old reasons for living no longer satisfy you, but the new reasons have not yet revealed themselves. It is as though you are standing at the edge of a great forest, knowing you must enter, but unable to see the path. This moment of hesitation, of apparent emptiness, is part of the journey. It tests your willingness to trust in the unseen. The archetype of the wanderer comes to mind. The wanderer has no home, no map, no clear destination. They are guided only by an inner calling, a whisper from the soul that says, keep going. In your current state, you are the wanderer. You may feel that you are failing because you are not moving fast enough, not achieving enough. But the soul does not measure progress in such terms. For the soul, even stillness is movement. Even emptiness is full of potential. It is in this state of apparent nothingness that the seeds of your true purpose are planted. I remember a time in my own life when I faced such emptiness. I had achieved much by worldly standards, but inside I felt hollow, as though I were a shell of a man. My dreams were vivid and troubling. I would see images of vast deserts, of dead trees, of endless gray skies. At first, I thought these dreams were warnings of despair, but then I realized they were invitations. The desert in my dream was not barren. It was waiting for me to plant something new. It was showing me that my old life had to die so that something truer could be born. You, too, are in the desert of the psyche. And though it feels lifeless now, it is preparing you for transformation. The unmotivated feeling you have is not laziness. It is a result of a deep recalibration. Your soul is realigning itself with a truth that is beyond the shallow motivations of the ego. The old drive to be someone or to make something of yourself was tied to your persona, the mask you wore to be accepted by society. But awakening strips this mask away. It leaves you vulnerable, rough, and uncertain. This is where true courage is required. Can you live without a mask? Can you allow yourself to be seen? Not as a person you were trained to be, but as the being you truly are. Many of the myths and symbols that arise in dreams during this phase point to death, transformation, and rebirth. You may dream of falling, of losing your possessions, of being chased. These dreams are not random. They are messages from your unconscious. They are telling you that you are undergoing a symbolic death. The structures of the old self are collapsing, and the new self is not yet visible. This is why you feel as though you are floating in an empty space. But remember, all creation begins in the void. The universe itself was born from emptiness, from the silent darkness before the first light. In this phase, you may also feel disconnected from the world around you. The things that once brought you joy, social gatherings, entertainment, even certain relationships may feel meaningless. This is because your consciousness has expanded. You have outgrown the smaller containers of meaning that once held you. You are now being called to find meaning not in external validation, but in the depths of your own being. This is not an easy task. It requires solitude, reflection, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it is in this very discomfort that you will find your strength. I encourage you to sit with your emptiness rather than trying to escape it. Treat it as a companion, as a teacher. Ask it what it wants to show you. Often, when we stop resisting, the emptiness reveals its gifts. It may show you parts of yourself that you have long ignored, your hidden desires, your suppressed creativity, your longing for authenticity. These revelations are not always pleasant. They may challenge your self-image, forcing you to confront aspects of yourself that you would rather avoid. But this confrontation is necessary for true transformation. There is an image that comes to me when I think of your current state, a dark cave, cold and silent. You are sitting inside, waiting for something to happen. You feel as though you have been abandoned by the world, as though no light will ever reach you again. But if you stay long enough, if you allow your eyes to adjust, you begin to see faint glimmers on the walls, reflections of your own inner light. This cave is your unconscious. It is not a place of punishment, but of revelation. It is where the treasures of the soul are hidden. But to find them, you must be willing to sit in the dark. I have often said that the greatest treasures of the psyche are guarded by the dragons of fear and doubt. These dragons appear when you are on the verge of discovering something profound. They are the voices that tell you that you are lost, that you are failing, that you will never find your way. But if you can face them with courage, you will see that they are not enemies but gatekeepers. They are testing your resolve. Will you run back to the safety of your old illusions? Or will you move forward into the unknown? You might ask, how do I move forward when I have no motivation? The answer is not to force yourself into action, but to listen deeply. The self speaks in whispers, in subtle nudges. It does not shout or demand. You must create a silence within to hear it. This may mean spending time in nature, journaling your dreams, or simply sitting in meditation. These practices are not meant to fill the emptiness, but to help you become comfortable with it. Over time, you will notice small impulses arising, a desire to create, to explore, to connect. These impulses come from the self, and they are far more powerful than the fleeting motivations of the ego. There is a profound paradox at the heart of awakening. The more you awaken, the more layers of false meaning fall away. And for a time, this feels like a loss. But in truth, it is the clearing of a field. Imagine a vast, overgrown landscape, tangled with weeds, thorns, and broken fences. Awakening is the fire that burns it all to the ground. What remains at first looks like devastation, an empty stretch of scorched earth. You mourn the loss of the familiar scenery, but this empty field is the fertile ground where your true life can finally be built. What you perceive as emptiness is actually the space where your authentic self is waiting to take root. To understand this emptiness, you must realize that much of what once motivated you was not your own. It was the voice of the collective unconscious, the inherited patterns and archetypes that told you how to live, what to value, and who to be. From birth, you were trained to fit into these collective molds, to adopt the ambitions and values of the culture around you. But awakening cracks these molds wide open. You see that many of the things you chased, success, validation, approval, were never truly yours. They were the dreams of others, implanted into you by a society, afraid of its own silence. When these borrowed dreams fall away, you are left with a strange question: what do I truly want? And at first, the answer feels like nothing. This is not because you want nothing, but because you are learning to listen for the first time. The self, the deep, eternal part of you, does not shout its desires. It does not push you with urgency or guilt. It is quiet, like the still surface of a lake. When the storms of the ego calm, you begin to sense the subtle ripples beneath. These ripples are the true movements of your being. They are not about achievement or recognition. They are about expression, connection, and meaning that transcends personal gain. But to feel these ripples, you must first endure the quiet. You must become comfortable in the absence of noise, in the absence of constant striving. I often tell my students that this phase of emptiness is not the end of your journey. It is the threshold. To cross it, you must confront the archetype of the void. In many myths, the hero must descend into the underworld, the place of shadows and forgotten things. It is here that they meet the guardians of death, who test their courage and their sincerity. Your emptiness is your underworld. It is asking you, are you willing to let everything you thought you were die, so that what you truly are can live? This is a frightening question, for the ego clings to its identity with all its strength. But if you say yes, if you surrender, you will find that what dies is only the illusion. The truth of who you are cannot be destroyed. There is a dream I once had, in which I stood before a great mirror. I expected to see my reflection, but instead I saw a vast night sky filled with stars. As I stared, I felt myself dissolve into that sky. There was no me, no boundary between the observer and the observed. At first, this felt like annihilation, like death. But then a strange peace came over me. I realized that I was not losing myself. I was becoming larger than I had ever imagined. I was both a drop in the ocean. This is what awakening does. It shows you that your personal identity is just one wave on the surface of the infinite sea. And when that wave crashes and disappears, the sea remains. The lack of motivation you feel now is the invitation to stop running and to sink into that sea. For so long, your life has been driven by the currents of external expectation. You were taught to chase goals, to strive for outcomes, to always be doing something. But the self does not operate on the same principle. It is not concerned with linear progress. It moves in cycles, like the moon, waxing and waning, retreating and returning. Your emptiness is part of this cycle. It is the waning phase, the descent into stillness before the next surge of growth. If you can honor this cycle, you will find that your motivation will return, but it will come from a place of depth, not from the surface level cravings of the ego. Consider the archetype of the hermit, which appears in many spiritual traditions. The hermit retreats from the world, not because they hate it, but because they seek something beyond it. They sit in solitude, in silence, and in emptiness, and in that silence, they find the lantern of truth, the light that does not depend on the approval of others. You are being called into your own hermitage now. It may not be a physical retreat, but it is a psychological one. It is the willingness to turn inward, to face the silence, and to allow it to transform you. This inner retreat is often accompanied by resistance. The mind rebels. It tells you that you should be doing something, achieving something, proving something. But listen carefully. This voice is not the voice of your soul. It is the voice of conditioning. It is the residue of all the societal archetypes that told you that your worth is measured by your productivity. When these voices grow loud, I invite you to ask yourself, what if I am already enough? What if I do not need to do anything to prove my value? Sit with that question. Let it sink into the emptiness. You may be surprised by the calm that follows. There is another reason why awakening can feel empty. It reveals the limitations of pleasure and success. Before awakening, you believed that achieving certain goals or acquiring certain things would bring you lasting happiness. But after awakening, you see through this illusion. You realize that nothing external can truly satisfy the longing of the soul. This realization can feel devastating at first. It is as though all the colors of life have faded, but this is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper joy, a joy that does not depend on circumstances, that arises simply from being. To access this joy, however, you must let go of your attachment to external outcomes. I remember a patient of mine many years ago who came to me in despair. She had achieved everything she thought. She wanted a successful career, wealth, recognition, but she felt empty. Is this all there is? She asked me. I told her that this question was not a sign of failure, but of awakening. Her soul was asking for more, not more possessions or achievements, but more truth, more authenticity. As she began to explore her dreams, her fears, and her shadow, she discovered parts of herself she had long ignored. She began to create, not because she wanted recognition, but because it felt like the natural expression of her being. And in that expression, she found a joy that no external success had ever given her. You, too, are being called to this deeper expression. The archetype of the Creator lives within all of us. It is not limited to artists or musicians. It is the impulse to bring something new into the world, something that reflects the essence of who we are. But this creation cannot arise from the ego's striving. It arises from stillness, from the willingness to listen to the whispers of the unconscious. Your current emptiness is the silence before creation. Do not mistake it for nothingness. It is the fertile void from which all true creation is born. When I speak of the unconscious, I do not mean a dark and empty cellar, but a living, breathing dimension of the psyche that is far more expansive than the conscious mind. It is the place where the archetypes live, where your dreams are born, where your true instincts and symbols reside. After spiritual awakening, your relationship with the unconscious changes. You can no longer ignore its presence, nor can you pretend that your life is fully under the control of your rational will. You begin to sense that there is a deeper intelligence guiding you, something that moves beneath the surface of your thoughts. And yet, because this intelligence does not speak in the language of the ego, it often feels like silence. It feels like nothingness. But this nothingness is alive in many spiritual traditions. This phase of emptiness is called the dark night. It is not dark because it is evil, but because it lacks the familiar light of your old understanding. You can no longer see the path that once seemed so clear. But this darkness is not punishment. It is a sacred recalibration. It is a psyche's way of turning you inward, of forcing you to look not at what you do, but at who you are. The unmotivated feeling you have is not laziness. It is your psyche's refusal to continue living according to the old scripts. The scripts that told you that your value lies in your productivity, your achievements, your social roles. Awakening burns these scripts. And for a while, you feel like you're left with nothing. But in that nothingness, you begin to sense the whisper of your true calling. Consider for a moment the symbol of the labyrinth. Unlike a maze, which is designed to confuse and trap you, a labyrinth has only one path, winding inward and then outward. Walking a labyrinth is a ritual of trust. You cannot see the center from the beginning, nor can you see the exit when you are inside. But if you keep walking, you will inevitably find both. Spiritual awakening is like entering a labyrinth. At first, you are exhilarated. You feel as though you have discovered something profound. But then, as the path turns and twists, you begin to feel lost. You think, why am I here? Where am I going? This feeling of emptiness is the midpoint of the labyrinth. It is a moment when you must trust the process, even when you cannot see the destination. Your dreams during this phase might be particularly vivid, filled with symbols that your rational mind cannot decipher. Pay attention to them. They are the language of the unconscious, trying to guide you through the labyrinth. You might dream of falling, of being chased, or of wandering through strange landscapes. These are all archetypal images pointing to the fact that you are in a transition between the known and the unknown. They are invitations to explore the parts of yourself that you have neglected. Do not dismiss these dreams as meaningless. They are the keys to understanding your emptiness. There is an archetype that often emerges in this stage, the archetype of the orphan. The orphan feels abandoned, disconnected, and alone. It longs for belonging, but does not know where to find it. This is how you might feel now. You have awakened from the collective dream, and you no longer find comfort in the old ways of living. The things that once gave you meaning, career, social status, even certain relationships may now feel hollow. You feel like an orphan cut off from the world. But the orphan archetype, when embraced, is not weak. It teaches you to find belonging not in the external world, but in your own soul. It teaches you to stand alone and yet feel deeply connected to the whole of existence. I will tell you something that may bring you peace, motivation, as you have known it, is an illusion. The ego is motivated by fear and fear of failure, desire for success. But the self, the deeper truth of your being, is not motivated. It simply expresses. It moves like a river, not because it has a goal, but because flowing is its nature. When you feel unmotivated, it is often because you are trying to push yourself with the old forces, fear and desire. But these forces no longer work. You must learn to move like the river, to act not because you are chasing something, but because expression itself is joy. This is a subtle but profound shift, and it takes time to embody. Think of a musician who plays not for fame or applause, but because music is the language of their soul. They are not motivated in the usual sense. They are simply expressing what is already within them. This is how you must learn to live after awakening. The emptiness you feel now is clearing the space for this kind of expression. But first, you must let go of the idea that your worth is tied to constant doing. You must allow yourself to be, even when it feels uncomfortable. From this beingness, true action will arise. Action that is effortless and authentic. There's a story I once read of a man who spent years trying to light a fire with damp wood. He tried every technique, every method, but the wood would not catch. Exhausted, he gave up and sat in silence. And in that silence, he realized that he had been trying too hard. He waited, letting the wood dry in the sun. And when the time was right, the fire ignited effortlessly. This is the nature of the soul. You cannot force it to burn with the ego's tools. You must wait for the inner conditions to align, for the deeper truth to reveal itself. The emptiness you feel is the drying of the wood. Trust that the fire will come. At this point, some people make the mistake of trying to fill the void with distractions. They chase new spiritual highs, new practices, new teachers, hoping to escape the discomfort of emptiness. But this only delays the process. The real work is to sit with the void, to let it show you what you are without all the layers. This is terrifying because it feels like stepping off a cliff. But I assure you, when you take that step, you will not fall. You will discover that you are the ground itself, that the emptiness you feared is not empty at all, but full of presence, full of life. The final gift of this phase is wholeness. When you stop resisting the emptiness, you begin to see that it is not separate from you. It is part of you, just as the shadow is part of you, just as your dreams and fears are part of you. Wholeness is not about eliminating the void. It is about embracing it. It is about realizing that you are both the fullness and the emptiness, both the light and the dark. This realization brings a kind of peace that no external achievement can offer. I want you to know that you are not broken. You are not failing. You are in the middle of a sacred process that has unfolded for countless seekers before you. The mystics, the sages, the prophets, they all walked through this same desert. They all faced the same silence, the same disorientation, and they emerged transformed, not because they conquered the emptiness, but because they allowed it to transform them. You too will emerge. The fire of the self is already burning within you. Even if you cannot feel its warmth yet, trust it. Trust yourself. There is something I must emphasize as we reach the heart of this journey. You are not meant to conquer the emptiness, but to befriend it. It is not an enemy, not a void to be filled with endless distractions or artificial purpose. It is a mirror. It reflects everything you have buried, everything you have denied, and everything you have yet to become. The reason awakening feels like a collapse is because the scaffolding of the false self is falling apart. And without that scaffolding, you no longer know where to place your hands or your feet. This sensation of floating, of being without ground, is the very initiation into a deeper ground, one that lies far beneath the surface, in the core of your being. When you feel unmotivated, it is because the old engines of your life have run out of fuel. Fear, comparison, social ambition, these no longer hold power over you, and yet the true engine, the divine force of creativity and meaning that lives in the self, has not yet ignited fully. This period between engines is not a mistake. It is as necessary as the silence between musical notes without silence. Music is just noise. Without the empty pause, your life cannot be reborn into something authentic. Do not despise this pause. It is sacred. It is shaping you in ways you cannot yet perceive. I often think of the symbol of the phoenix when I speak of this phase. The phoenix is consumed by fire, reduced to ashes. And for a time, those ashes look like the end of all things. But hidden within them is the seed of rebirth. Your emptiness is the ashes. It is the dissolution of all that is false and transient. And in these ashes, something eternal is stirring. You do not need to know what it is. You do not need to have a plan. The self does not operate on the timeline of the ego. It will rise in its own time. And when it does, you will feel a power and clarity that is unlike anything you have ever known. But for now, your task is simply to wait, to listen, and to trust. When I say listen, I do not mean with your ears, I mean with your soul. This listening is an inward turning, a deep attention to the subtle movements of your inner world. You may feel drawn to certain symbols, to certain dreams, to certain emotions that arise seemingly out of nowhere. These are not random. They are the language of your unconscious, the voice of the self, trying to speak to you. Jungian analysis teaches us that the unconscious does not speak in words but in images, in archetypes, in feelings. Pay attention to these. Write down your dreams. Reflect on the images that linger in your mind. They are clues, breadcrumbs, leading you out of the forest of confusion. Sometimes in this phase, you will feel a deep longing, a longing for something you cannot name. It is not a longing for success, or love, or recognition, though it may appear to wear those masks. It is a longing for wholeness. This longing is the call of the self, urging you to integrate the parts of yourself you have abandoned. Perhaps you have suppressed your wildness, or your creativity, or your capacity for deep love. These parts are now knocking on the door of your consciousness, asking to be let in. And until you open that door, you will feel restless, unmotivated, and incomplete. The emptiness is simply the space created by the absence of these parts. You must understand that awakening is not about transcending the human experience. It is not about rising above your shadows or emotions. It is about integrating them It is about becoming whole. Many seekers fall into the trap of chasing only the light, thinking that spirituality means rejecting all that is dark or messy within them. But this is a mistake. True spirituality is not about escaping life. It is about entering it more fully, embracing both its beauty and its pain. Your emptiness is calling you to this integration. It is inviting you to meet your shadow, to sit with your fears, to acknowledge your wounds. Only by doing so can you become whole. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the part of you that you have not yet loved. It contains both your darkness and your power. When you awaken, the shadow often comes to the surface because it is finally ready to be seen. This can feel overwhelming. You may experience emotions you thought you had outgrown: anger, grief, jealousy, despair. Do not push these away. They are not obstacles. They are guides. Each emotion is a messenger, carrying a fragment of your soul that has been waiting for your attention. If you can sit with these emotions, feel them fully, and listen to what they are telling you, you will find that the emptiness begins to shift. It transforms into a space of healing. I recall a patient who once told me that after her spiritual awakening, she felt as if she had lost all her colors. Life, which once seemed vibrant and exciting, now felt gray and hollow. But as we explored her dreams and her shadow, she discovered that the colors had not been lost. They had simply retreated inward. They were waiting for her to claim them, to live not for the approval of others, but from the truth of her own soul. Over time, as she embraced the parts of herself she had long denied, her life began to fill with color again, not the artificial brightness of constant stimulation, but the deep, steady radiance of authenticity. This is what awaits you as well. Another important aspect of this phase is learning to live without constant certainty. The ego craves control. It wants to know what is coming next. But awakening teaches you to live in the unknown. It is like walking through a dense fog. You can only see a few steps ahead, but that is enough. You do not need to see the whole path. The self reveals itself gradually, like a landscape emerging from mist. If you can accept this, if you can trust the process, you will find that each step, no matter how small, is exactly where you need to be. In the silence of this emptiness, you might begin to notice subtle currents of inspiration. They are not the loud, demanding goals of the ego. They are gentle impulses, like the desire to create something small and beautiful, or the urge to spend time in nature, or the feeling that you want to connect more deeply with someone. These are the movements of the self. Follow them. Even if they seem insignificant, they are leading you toward your authentic life. Over time, as you honor these small impulses, a new kind of motivation will emerge. A motivation that is not driven by fear or desire, but by joy and alignment. I want you to remember that every great transformation begins in darkness. The seed must crack in the soil before it can sprout. The caterpillar must dissolve before it becomes a butterfly. The winter must come before the spring. Your emptiness is your winter. It is not a punishment, but a season, and like all seasons, it will pass, but it will leave you changed. You will emerge from this emptiness with a deeper understanding of who you are, a stronger connection to your true self, and a clarity that no external success could ever give you. In time, you will look back on this phase and see it for what it truly is, a gift, a sacred dismantling of everything false, so that only the truth remains. You will see that the emptiness was not empty at all, but full of potential, full of life, full of the quiet power of the self waiting to be born. Trust this. Trust yourself. The path is unfolding, even if you cannot see it yet. And one day, the fire of your true being will blaze so brightly that you will look back at this quiet, shadowed time with gratitude. For it was here, in this emptiness, that you found the depths of your soul